We've got breaking news on the terrifying abduction of Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of TV anchor Savannah Guthrie. She was snatched from her home in Tucson at 2 in the morning on February 1st. For weeks, everyone assumed this was just a burglary gone wrong. But today, top criminal profilers from the FBI have officially shut down that initial theory. They've stated that this was a meticulously calculated crime. The ruthless criminal didn't break in to steal property. He was targeting Nancy specifically. This chilling announcement completely blows up previous assumptions and leaves us with one central question. Why would anyone intentionally hunt down an 84-year-old woman who lives alone and relies on a pacemaker just to survive? Just how cruel and terrifying is the real motive driving this heartbreaking case? Today, we're uncovering the incredibly dark answers that experts have just revealed to the whole world. Let's start by taking a hard look at the first big reveal that has completely shifted where this investigation is heading. For several weeks in a row, the main story surrounding the heartbreaking disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie rested on an idea that seemed logical but was totally flawed. The general public, along with a lot of early media commentators, figured that a random, disorganized burglar broke into the quiet Tucson residence, panicked when he unexpectedly bumped into the elderly homeowner, and somehow let the situation escalate into a full-scale abduction. However, top-tier former FBI agents Jim Fitzgerald and Greg Rogers have now stepped up to entirely dismantle and reject that first theory. Through their rigorous behavioral analysis, they've laid out a strong argument that clearly outlines the huge psychological and tactical differences between a crime of opportunity and a planned attack. According to the detailed breakdown Rogers provided, a standard robbery is almost entirely about getting quick access and finding the path of least resistance. Your average thief looking for cash actively hunts for an incredibly easy target, like an unlocked back window, an open garage door, or a house that looks pitch black and completely empty. Their main goal is to get inside the building quietly, grab whatever valuable electronics or jewelry are within easy reach, and get out of there without ever making physical contact with or even seeing another human being. A targeted kidnapping, on the other hand, operates on a completely different, way more dangerous psychological wavelength. It requires deep forethought, careful surveillance of the target, and a chilling level of planning. The perpetrator in this specific case didn't just stumble onto this house by accident while walking through the neighborhood. They picked this specific address with absolute deadly precision. This framework brings the investigation to the single most critical detail in the timeline: the exact hour the break-in happened. The breach of the property took place at approximately 2 in the morning. To an experienced criminal profiler, that specific timestamp isn't just a minor detail. It acts like a giant spotlight shining directly on the attacker's true motive. If a guy is solely interested in stealing physical property, the absolute worst time to force your way into a home is the dead of night. At 2 a.m., the whole neighborhood is completely blanketed in darkness. But way more importantly, the people living there are almost guaranteed to be inside, sound asleep in their beds. Experienced property thieves actively and desperately avoid human confrontation. They much prefer to strike in the middle of a weekday afternoon, specifically when homeowners are away at the office or out running errands. By deliberately choosing to breach the residence at 2 o'clock in the morning, right when the suburban streets were dead quiet and all the porch lights were out, the intruder made a highly calculated choice. They knew for a fact that the elderly homeowner would be there and asleep. That specific timing proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the ultimate goal of this invasion was never to sweep the living room for objects. The primary goal from the very start of this nightmare was to physically ambush, completely control, and extract a living human being. They hit at 2 in the morning because they wanted to ensure she was disoriented, physically isolated, and totally unable to scream for help or trigger a fast response from local police. On top of that, retired investigator Jim Fitzgerald points to a chilling detail from the fallout that backs up this scary theory. The total lack of noise about the huge cash bounty, right on the heels of the brutal snatching. Police and relatives frantically offered up a whopping $1 million for solid leads that would bring her home safe and sound. If we were dealing with a run-of-the-mill break-in by some frantic, two-bit crook hunting for fast cash, a $1 million pot would almost guarantee a bite. A perp just in it for the money would likely try to cut a deal from the shadows, work through a middleman online, or dump her somewhere safe to grab that life-changing check while dodging a death penalty rap. But that massive offer hit a wall of absolute dead air. Fitzgerald notes that this refusal to engage speaks volumes to the detectives working the case. This guy essentially walked right past a winning lottery ticket. That radio silence tells the Bureau loud and clear that cash isn't fueling this horror show. The cold-blooded abductor could not care less about the payout. His goal is total dominion over Nancy Guthrie, the sick thrill of keeping her caged, the mind games played on her celebrity daughter, and the rush of power from pulling off such a bold, high-risk operation seemed to be worth way more to this dangerous predator than a $1 million check ever could. With the Bureau tossing the random robbery theory into the trash, we have to face the cold, hard facts of what went down that evening. If the masked man who breached that sleepy Tucson residence wasn't hunting for easy cash or diamonds, then the cops are stuck with a grim realization. He entered that specific home just to steal a life. This insight forces the team to switch gears and head down the main avenue of the probe, leading us straight to the scary idea of a calculated proxy strike. Ex-CIA officer and FBI Special Agent Tracy Walder recently gave her take on this exact horror scenario. Her read on the case is blunt and gut-wrenching for the relatives. Based on her years in the field, the intense focus on the victim, the careful selection of the house, and the surgical execution of the midnight snatch make it clear this wasn't some random thug. Your average burglar chasing a quick buck doesn't have the discipline or the long game planning to orchestrate a kidnapping this big. They don't glide through a dark house without tripping sensors or leaving a messy trail of clues behind. Walder is convinced that this kind of tactical efficiency points to a very specific breed of predator. We're dealing with a guy driven by a deep, unshakable fixation. This perp didn't just grab an 84-year-old lady's name out of a directory. No. He spent weeks studying her every move before executing a near-perfect break-in. That angle completely flips the script on the manhunt. It moves the magnifying glass off the elderly victim and focuses it right on her high-profile kin. It implies the real object of this hate might not be the great-grandma dragged from her sheets, but her superstar daughter TV anchor Savannah Guthrie. As a household name beaming the morning headlines into millions of living rooms daily, she pulls in a huge audience nationwide. But that kind of constant fame comes with a serious, dangerous price tag. Appearing on screens across the country, at the crack of dawn acts as a magnet for unstable individuals detached from the real world. Experts like Walder think the snatcher could easily be an unhinged viewer nursing a serious grudge against the host. That rage might stem from some imagined slight, a hot-button story that rubbed them the wrong way, or a totally made-up relationship existing only in their own head. Or we could be looking at a dangerous stalker who built a fantasy romance with the TV star, a connection that's warped into a savage, unchecked obsession. No matter which nightmare you subscribe to, the engine powering this felony stays completely identical. It exposes a raw hunger to pull the strings, exact revenge, or utterly wreck the star's world. To the abductor, that older woman isn't a flesh-and-blood person. She's merely a bargaining chip, a high-stakes asset deployed in a sick, sprawling mind game directed squarely at her well-known child. To get a handle on this sinister logic, you've got to examine the cold, hard facts of life for a major American celebrity right now. Savannah Guthrie operates within an ironclad, surveillance-heavy safety net. Being an elite network broadcaster means she's shadowed by expert protection teams everywhere she steps. You can bet her main residence is rigged with the finest surveillance tech and alert systems on the market. Plus, every move she makes is choreographed to dodge danger. A fixated maniac trying to hit her head-on would be staring down a brick wall. Armed sentries would have them on the ground in cuffs way before they breached her personal space. Seeing that this fortress was impenetrable, the cold-blooded perp ran the numbers on a vicious alternative, figuring if they couldn't lay a hand on the main prize, they'd simply sidestep all those heavy defenses. They'd aim specifically for the most exposed, fragile link in her private world. They opted to unleash the ultimate emotional wreckage by snatching her, aging mom straight from where she slept. Although the idea of an indirect strike on a TV icon holds a lot of water, a different top profiler from the Bureau has floated a second, just as horrifying scenario. Ex-behavioral expert Jim Clement argues detectives need to flip the script entirely on this investigation. He posits that the spark for this creepy break-in could have zero connection to Savannah Guthrie or her network fame. On the contrary, Clement contends the twisted incentive comes purely from how defenseless the victim looked through the eyes of a veteran hunter. Choosing to attack usually boils down to weighing the odds. These threats prowl for the easiest route. They aren't looking for a brawl. They avoid resistance and definitely don't want to flag down the cops or alert vigilant folks next door. When a wolf sizes up the layout of this midnight kidnapping, they might not spot a superstar's mother. They view what they deem the ultimate low-hanging fruit. To really grasp this nightmare point of view, we need to zoom in on the tragic reality of the victim and how she lived day to day. Nancy Guthrie is an 84-year-old lady battling serious trouble getting around and depends totally on a pacemaker to keep her ticker going 24/7. What's more, she was all by herself in a regular home on a hushed, dim street in Tucson. No big watchdog to sound the alarm, and zero signs of fancy, modern surveillance guarding her yard. For your average, decent person, that sounds like a kind senior citizen living out her retirement in quiet peace. But for a cold-blooded creeping figure, that very same setup screams easy target. It means a victim stuck in place, too frail to brawl with an intruder, with no husband or roommate down the hall to wake up and punch 911. The deep solitude and intense bodily restrictions of an 84-year-old grandma mark her as easy pickings for anyone wanting to do dirt without getting hit back. This steers detectives toward a spine-tingling core mystery. How on earth did the disguised perp have all this intimate, precise intel on her? Where did they learn she was solo, physically struggling, and unprotected by alarms? Clement notes that crooks don't just take a stab at facts this crucial. They've got to harvest them, suggesting the perp logged serious hours, scoping out the block and keeping tabs on that specific property. However, Clemente pushes this nightmare scenario even further, offering a disturbing take on how the intruder got such inside intel. He theorizes the abductor might actually be a service worker doing his rounds. Consider the sheer number of random people we wave onto our land and into our living rooms annually without a second thought. This guy could be the local plumber called to fix a drip, the landscaper trimming the hedges, a sparky, a pool guy, or even the courier dropping off cardboard boxes every other day. Workers like that get a free pass to walk right up to the doorstep and peek into our personal sanctuaries. A wolf hiding in that kind of day job gets a golden ticket to snoop around unnoticed, memorizing the floor plan and sizing up just how defenseless the senior citizen inside really is. They'd spot the missing dog bowl instantly, the lack of surveillance gear, and how shaky the lady is when she signs for a package. If that person already nursed some sick, violent urges, a quick 15-minute service call gave him all the ammo needed to hatch a horrific plot. He saw a silent street, a lonely senior, and zero security measures, and chose to leverage that advantage to strike the moment the subdivision went pitch black. While detectives keep sifting through the forensic traces recovered on site, there is a whole other dimension to this case, centering on the masked man's headspace. To really grasp the horror of this midnight break-in, We need to scrutinize the behavioral cues picked up by the porch cam. Retired FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole offered a bone-chilling deconstruction of that security footage. When a top-tier analyst reviews tape like that, they aren't merely checking out the perp's outfit or gait. They're hunting for subtle tells that expose the criminal's internal state right then and there. What O'Toole found in those few seconds on the stoop has rattled the entire police force. The scariest part wasn't a weapon or an aggressive lunge, but something you'd miss if you didn't know where to look. Her assessment highlighted a terrifying void where normal human feelings should be. You don't see an ounce of anxiety or any hurried motions. His body language under those floodlights was completely devoid of jitters. If an average Joe resolved to bust into a house at 2 in the morning to snatch an 84-year-old woman, they'd be falling apart. You'd see trembling hands and rapid, shallow breaths. And they'd be checking their 6 every 2 seconds in a total panic. But this guy? None of that. He loitered on that landing with a creepily level head, operating with a steady, calculated flow that totally contradicted the brutality of what he was doing. O'Toole posits this icy composure points to one of 2 grim possibilities. Either this predator is a veteran offender who's pulled off similar assaults plenty of times, or he's been running a dress rehearsal for this exact snatch and grab in his head for months. He looped this sick scenario in his brain so often that actually standing there in the flesh felt like just another Tuesday. He'd already lived the fantasy. This was just the final act. This disturbing read on his psyche brings us to the second, equally dangerous facet of his mentality. It sets him miles apart from your typical thug looking for a ransom payout. O'Toole draws a jarring parallel between this John Doe and one of America's most notorious serial murderers. She likened his hunger for the spotlight directly to the infamous Zodiac killer. Zodiac didn't just scare the country with bodies. He did it through non-stop, cocky letters to the press and police. He fed off the media frenzy his bloodshed created. He craved the notoriety, wanted his name on everyone's lips and whole cities frozen in terror. According to the FBI, the guy who snatched Nancy Guthrie from her bed is operating on that same narcissistic wavelength. This was never meant to be some hush-hush shakedown happening behind closed doors. That desperate need for an audience is exactly why the kidnapper went out of his way to send his first ransom notes straight to major news networks and TMZ. A typical kidnapper looking for a quick multi-million-dollar payday would keep it quiet, using encrypted apps to deal with the family privately. They want the cash, not the glare of the national spotlight. But this guy, he practically begged for the media circus. He leaked those demands on purpose because he's dying for the world to see what he did. It makes him feel powerful. It makes him feel important, something his sad, empty life never gave him. More than anything, this sicko wants to see Savannah Guthrie under those bright studio lights, begging for her mom's life. He wants to humiliate a big-shot celebrity and make the cops dance to his tune on the world stage. You can bet this criminal is sitting right there, in front of a TV, glued to the coverage, stoking his ego while he waits. But even with all that scary prep work and the seemingly perfect late-night grab, nobody's perfect. When a perp steps out of his fantasy world and into a real crime scene, mistakes happen. And those tiny slip-ups are exactly what the Bureau is hunting for right now. According to ex-profiler Jim Clemente, the suspect made one huge, glaring error that could crack this whole case wide open. Even though this cold-blooded intruder was super careful about covering his tracks with heavy gloves, dark clothes, and a ski mask, he messed up big time. That mask didn't cover his whole face. It left his mouth and the lower part of his face right out in the open. That one detail is a total game changer for the forensics team. An open mouth means heavy breathing, spitting out DNA, and potentially leaving a treasure trove of biology right on the porch. Plus, investigators found a tossed glove just 2 miles from the scene, and it just tested positive for male DNA. By matching whatever biology they pulled from the house with the genetic material on that glove, police are going all in on a revolutionary technique called genetic genealogy. It's the exact same science that took down the Golden State Killer. They're running this unknown male profile through public genealogy sites right now, scouring for distant cousins, and building out a massive family tree that's going to lead them right to the kidnapper's front door. While the forensic squad pulls all-nighters processing that DNA, FBI digital analysts are picking apart that doorbell footage frame by frame. They're hunting for a totally different kind of clue, a physical giveaway. While the guy was on that well-lit porch, shifting around before he kicked in the door, his clothes slipped. In that split second, the high-definition security cam caught something huge. It showed a peek of a tattoo on the attacker's body. To a pro profiler or a gang unit cop, ink is basically a permanent roadmap pointing straight to a suspect. Tattoos are like walking history books. They tell you where a guy's been and who he runs with. Feds are using high-end enhancement software to analyze every single pixel of that clip. They're working like crazy to clean up the blur and reconstruct the design. They're looking for regional shading styles, prison ink, or gang symbols that could shrink their suspect list in a heartbeat. Even if that body art turns out to be a one-of-a-kind original, it still gives detectives a huge leg up on the case. Authorities can blast that sharpened photo out to every ink shop from here to the state line. Then there's the third big clue that might just crack this nightmare wide open. The guy's very particular choice of kit. You can spot the abductor in the clips hauling a 25-liter Ozark Trail rucksack. Detectives clocked immediately that you can only grab that specific, rugged brand off the shelves at Walmart. That sparked an enormous, high-speed deep dive into mountains of corporate sales data. But veteran cops know a pro who mapped out an invasion this smooth wouldn't make rookie mistakes, like swiping his own plastic and leaving a digital trail right to his front door. So, they've cast the net much wider to trawl the muddy gray areas of the online resale world. Investigators are tearing through logs on sites like eBay and Facebook Marketplace, looking for recent hits. They're hunting for anyone who flipped or bought that exact 25-liter pack just before the snatch. The perp probably figured snagging his gear with cash from a stranger would keep his hands clean and the trail cold. The problem for him is that every deal involves another person. Cops are banking on the hope that whoever unknowingly offloaded that 25-liter bag to a shady character will spot it on the 6 o'clock news and call the tip line before the clock runs out. With the hunt for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie hitting crunch time, analysts have landed on a grim theory that connects the dots. Retired FBI profiler Greg McCrary, a pioneer who basically wrote the book on behavioral analysis, brought up the unsettling idea of convergence. At first, the question was whether this guy was a stalker obsessed with TV anchor Savannah Guthrie by proxy, or just a local, cold-blooded creep who spotted a defenseless grandma all alone on a sleepy block. McCrary bets the ugly truth is a mix of column A and column B. Under this convergence model, the guy in the mask was likely already fixated on the famous Guthrie clan. But rather than staying a fanboy behind a screen, this psycho found a chink in the armor. He saw that while the celebrity daughter had bodyguards and fortresses, her aging mom was down in Tucson, living totally exposed and on her own. The perp managed to blend his warped fandom with icy, hunter-like planning. He knew he'd stumbled onto the ultimate soft target. That collision of desire and opportunity is likely what snapped, driving him to drag his sick, twisted fantasy out into the real world under the cover of darkness. The scariest part of this whole mess isn't just the break-in on February 1st, but what the guy did once he left. The feds are convinced a guy this disciplined didn't just evaporate. Chances are he slotted right back into his daily grind. He's out there blending in, playing the part of the boring neighbor, the solid employee, or the quiet cousin. That's why the Bureau is begging the public for help right now. Detectives can't crack this puzzle unless the community steps up. They need everyone to take a hard look at the guys in their circle. Specifically, they're hunting for anyone who showed a weird, out-of-the-blue shift in habits right when the abduction went down. Did a buddy call out of work, bail on plans, or just go ghost on the group chat for a couple of days right after February 1st. Furthermore, detectives are asking the public to keep an eye out for anyone showing a weird, obsessive fixation on Savannah Guthrie, her extended family, or just someone who is glued to the intense media coverage of this investigation. The person behind this terrible crime is hiding a big secret, and that pressure is bound to make them crack. There is someone out there who knows this guy, and someone has definitely seen his behavior change in strange ways over the last few weeks. To get that key witness to come forward and finally tell the truth, authorities have upped the ante. The cash reward for verified tips leading to the safe recovery of Nancy Guthrie and the capture of her kidnapper has officially been raised to a staggering $1,200,000. That is a life-changing amount of money waiting for the one person brave enough to speak up. The family is desperate for answers. Time is running out for an 84-year-old woman who needs a pacemaker and daily care to survive. If you have seen anything that doesn't sit right, recognize that backpack, or know a guy acting odd since February 1st, you need to act now. Don't wait. And don't assume your tip is too small to matter. We strongly urge you to contact the FBI immediately by dialing their hotline at 1-800-CALL the Federal Bureau. Or you can reach out directly to the detectives at the Puma County Sheriff's Department. Every second matters in a kidnapping case this big. We need the community to come together to bring this grandmother home and bring this predator to justice. Thanks for watching this report. Your support helps us find the truth in these terrifying cases. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to the channel and share the video. Stay safe, keep your eyes open, and we'll catch you next time.
The chilling abduction of Nancy Guthrie shatters a comforting illusion we all hold dear, that a quiet suburban street and a locked front door are enough to keep the monsters at bay. This heartbreaking case teaches us a profound and urgent lesson about the silent vulnerabilities hiding in plain sight within our own communities. Our elderly loved ones, the people who spent a lifetime raising and caring for us, often find themselves isolated and defenseless as the years go by. To a cold-blooded predator, a grandmother living alone isn't a human being with a story. She is merely a soft target. These threats often camouflage themselves in the mundane, hiding behind the everyday guise of a delivery driver or a repairman, quietly studying the fragile routines of the most exposed among us. The crucial takeaway isn't just to buy better security cameras, but to actively rebuild the forgotten fortress of community. We can no longer afford to mind our own business. We must become the watchful eyes for those who cannot protect themselves. Check on your aging neighbors. Notice the unfamiliar vehicles on your street. Pay close attention to sudden, unexplainable shifts in the behavior of people you know. True safety is not a passive guarantee. It is a shared responsibility. We are the ultimate shield against the dark. Let this nightmare be the wake-up call that forces us to look out for one another before the unimaginable kicks in the door.